There are fans of Oblivion who swear the quest content of the game is the best part of it. To those fans, I just gotta ask, what game were you all playing? Okay, maybe that's a little harsh. In truth, a lot of them specifically mention the Dark Brotherhood questline and the Thieves Guild questline, which are both fantastic examples of what Oblivion can really accomplish when all of its pieces are being used well. But I'd say a vast majority of the game's quests are some of the worst things it has to offer. Like, some of it is insultingly bad. This no doubt has to do with the fact that the game has over 200 quests, proving that, like with dungeons, Bethesda was opting for a quantity over quality approach. A lot of the design of these quests and guilds fell onto individual designers at Bethesda, some of whom excelled at this task and some of whom just couldn't quite meet the same performance. Unfortunately, a lot of the subpar content still made the cut, leading to some of Oblivion's greatest quality gradients. There's a certain trend in Oblivion quests, a formula if you will. It's almost the antithesis to what's supposed to make these games good. I'm going to go through the main story, the 4 major guilds, the Daedric shrines, and a select few side quests to uncover that formula, because the bulk of the bad quests play right into that formula, while the better ones either work it to the best of their abilities or shirk it almost entirely. So let's get this show on the road. The main story questline of Oblivion is very forgettable. Aside from a totally optional segment that has you grinding, closing Oblivion gates, there's no point in the story that is offensively terrible, which is more than can be said about some of the other quest chains in this game. But it's also outshined by other quest chains too. The issues holding back the main story are numerous, so let's just dive in and start covering them as we go. We are introduced to the story the moment we start a new game. The one of only 2 pre-rendered cutscenes we see gives us the basic gist of what's going on. An evil army from another dimension is on the march and only the Emperor is aware of the danger they pose. We start the game in Bethesda's patented prison introduction, having finished baking our potato monster, and getting heckled by the professional prisoner from across the hall. The Emperor we'd seen in the cutscene just a few minutes earlier comes strolling down with his guards as they talk about an assassination attempt that unfortunately killed his heirs. You gotta feel for Uriel Septim. The dude knew his family was doomed to be assassinated in this way, and he was powerless to stop it because the hands of fate and all that shit. I don't know. On the one hand, Patrick Stewart's acting here does lend Uriel Septim some real life. But on the other, I'm a tough crowd to sell ideas of prophecy and fate to. If you're going to do it, you need a lot more build-up than a couple of minutes of telling, not showing exposition. But we'll put a pin in that thought and come back to it later. The secret passage to escape the city leads through the Imperial prison, and wouldn't you know it, we just happen to be occupying the cell that is supposed to be off limits because it's a secret escape route. But here we are, coming face to face with the Emperor, and he recognizes it as such and states it is the will of the gods that we meet in this fashion, which means our destiny is now tied to his fate, and we are destined for great things. Once again, let's sideline the prophecy stuff. The game just layers it on really thick in the beginning to give us a motive, I guess. I don't know. I don't think my character or I need more motivation than just get the fuck out of this tiny dungeon because we didn't come to Cyrodiil to listen to that twat hurling insults at us all day. The guards, being guards, don't trust us but tolerate our presence as the Emperor seems alright with us tagging along. Eventually we are told to stay put, but as fate would have it, a rat smelling dinner punches through the wall, giving us a way out. We follow the route and it comes back to the Emperor and his guard unit. He talks more about fate and tells the guards we must help them because destiny. We go a little more and eventually come to a dead end where the Emperor, stripped of his remaining 2 guards, takes off the Amulet of Kings and tells us we must get it to Joffrey, and we are the only one capable of closing shut the jaws of Oblivion. He then gets murdered because the devs decided to disable our controls, forcing us to watch the assassin come through a secret entrance and do the deed. It's just a very lame and ignoble end to a character who, if you read up on, lived a very rich and interesting life. Boris, being understandably mistrusting of us the whole entire way, does a complete 180 when he sees us standing over the body of the Emperor with the most precious item in all of Tamriel now, because only the Amulet of Kings can light the dragon fires that keep the evil army banished from the realm of mortals. But the fact that the Emperor, who just watched his whole family die and is on the run for his own life, suddenly takes a shine to some random prisoner automatically makes us qualified to handle the most valuable item in the world right now. If this sounds just a little contrived and stupid, that's because it is. The best is when Boris assumes that I'm an experienced assassin because of my playstyle. An experienced assassin, standing over the freshly assassinated Emperor holding the most valuable item in the world. Not suspicious in the slightest. Right. So Boris tells us to take the amulet to Joffrey, the head of his organization who is currently in hiding because subterfuge is the greatest weapon the Blades have in performing their duties. So not only am I horribly suspect right now, but he then proceeds to disclose the identity and whereabouts of the only group possible of stopping all of this. We beat it out of the sewers and off to deliver the amulet. Eventually. I got some other things to do first. Eventually we get the amulet to Joffrey because I literally have no other use for the amulet except deliver it because the game refuses to let me do anything else with it. I guess it's the will of the gods that I can't be separated from the thing. I just love plot devices like that, especially in games that are supposed to be about player agency. Okay, I swear I'll stick to the plot and save the conclusion until we are done. But I'm sure you're all catching on to what I'm alluding to, and to spoil what comes next, no, this doesn't improve. Joffrey believes we can be trusted because Boris is a good guard, even if I do have my doubts about his competency. I mean, we did deliver the amulet, so we should be trustworthy now, right? It's not like I might not be a double agent working for the enemy to deliver the amulet to gain inside knowledge, and that my fellow agents will be swinging by to scoop up the amulet once I get what I really want, right? We'll get back to that thought in a few minutes. Joffrey tells us that Uriel Septim, being Uriel Septim and being able to see the future, saw the need to father an illegitimate child and have him raised in secret outside of the royal court under an assumed identity. Classic Uriel Septim trying to outsmart fate. If only he was able to outsmart the assassin that stabbed him in the back as he stood there smiling at us like someone who welcomed the sweet embrace of death. It turns out the untitled son lives in Kvatch as a priest, so being the trustworthy guy that we are, Joffrey asks us to go save him because surely the agents of evil are hot on his trail too. I mean, I don't see why they would unless they possess the same future-seeing Uriel does, as I assume the Emperor took the proper precautions to tell no one except the man instructed to deliver the baby to an uninformed family. That being you, Joffrey. I'm talking about you. And you break that silence to send me to do something that you might have wanted to do yourself because now that secret is out, and if I was an agent of the enemy, you just gave me the location of the last card you had left in your hand. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but goddamn. We get to Kvatch, and wouldn't you know it, Daedra are attacking the city. I guess they found out about Martin after all? It's actually not explained whether Kvatch was targeted because Martin's Septim is here, or if it was just sort of a random coincidence. There's 9 cities in the game though, and the fact that they just happened to land on the right city their first shot kinda leads me to believe it was intentional. In which case, why didn't they just... Never mind. Too many questions. I just need to stop questioning and start believing. Believing in destiny, believing in my role as a savior of the world, and believing in the ability of the writers.
I'm getting out of here before it's too late! They'll be here any minute, I'm telling you! Run while you can!
We arrive at Kvatch to find we were a little late to the party. Most of the Daedra and the siege engine are gone, but one gate still remains to torment those who survived. In order to get Martin out of the city, we first have to deal with the gate and clear the way to the chapel. This means going into the gate because, as the guard captain puts it,
I don't know how to close this gate, but it must be possible, because the enemy closed the ones they opened during the initial attack.
There's really no reason to think this, seeing as we know nothing about the gate. But at least he's honest that he believes he's throwing a life away because of it. With no other choice given to us, we jump through the gate and enter the plains of Oblivion. I've mentioned the gates a few times now, so I guess it's high time to explain why these gates are probably my least favorite places in the game. While the atmosphere is pretty cool, and ignoring the tedium they signal for me now, they do a great job of instilling a feeling of dread appropriate for the realm of a god of chaos and destruction. But the motif definitely gets tiring after you visit a few of them and realize they are all identical. Time doesn't change, weather doesn't change, the scenery doesn't change, just the layouts. And the layouts are nothing short of some of the worst designs in the game. They are incredibly confusing and frustrating to navigate due to a lack of recognizable landmarks. Really, the navigation of these gates is the main source of frustration players will feel when going through them. You'll sometimes be forced to hunt down doors to maze-like cavern networks to progress to the next section of the level, and those entrances can blend in with the landscape and be easy to miss. To make it all worse, there's usually arbitrary roadblocks like locked gates that require you to take a secondary route to find the mechanism to open them, artificially extending your stay in these dull locations and making navigating them even more confusing. All the while, you are fighting some of the most boring, damage-spongy enemies in the game over and over again. Oblivion gates are the very soul of monotonous tedium. The first gate would have been a lackluster novelty if you only had to do it the one time, but the fact you'll be finding yourself in this realm a dozen times if you do the optional main quests, you'll end up harboring a particular loathing for them. So with that massive rant out of the way, let's just skip to the end where we remove the sigil stone anchoring the gate, which is the only way to leave a gate upon entering one. We're sent back to Kvatch where the captain is surprised we survived. I'm glad he believed in our abilities. Seeing as we managed to do what nobody else was able to thus far, he asks for our help getting into the city to free the civilians trapped in the chapel. Seeing as that's where Martin is, we agree and help finish off the Daedra in this part of the city. We finally get to Martin, who is at first insistent we got the wrong dude, but quickly capitulates because we helped drive off the Daedra, so we must be a good guy. Now, that's actual logic there. He's not agreeing to join us because we inexplicably showed up with the Amulet of Kings from the recently killed Emperor, something equally as daft. He thinks we are a hero because we demonstrated an actual act of heroism. We head back to Wayne Priory to find it's under attack by the same robed people as the ones who killed the Emperor back in the sewers. I'd make a stink out of the enemy appearing to be omniscient, but seeing how blockheaded the Blades have been up to this point, I really should be surprised they hadn't been attacked sooner, like at the same time as they were murdering the Emperor. My point being, it's not surprising in the slightest they knew that the amulet was here, and Joffrey at least has the wherewithal to realize that's what they were after. And surprise surprise, it's gone, but at least we got the heir, so there's still some hope. Joffrey makes probably the first good decision he has this entire story and suggests we all retreat to Cloudworld Temple, where a handful of men could defend against an army. I'm not sure if we could defend against an army of demons who can spawn a fire-spewing, city-devouring siege engine with portals they seem to be able to open up wherever and whenever they wish, but it's better than playing monk in an indefensible city. It's best we don't tempt fate and risk losing the heir a second time. At Cloudruler Temple, they officially recognize Martin as Emperor, and we're inducted as a member of the Blades because our competency outshines a lot of the other members right now, and times are kinda tough. We're sent back to the Imperial City to investigate our enigmatic enemy that seems to know so much about us, meanwhile we know nothing about them. We meet back up with Boris, who is still trying to keep a low profile, but that's clearly not working as he has to fight off an assassin and then try and play it off as though I just caught him while he was on the shitter or something. We find a book confirming that this is the work of a Daedric cult, and Boris has us go talk to an expert of Daedric cults at the Arcane University who tells us, yep, we got ourselves a cult. Not only that, this is a particularly fanatic cult following the teachings of Mankar Cameron, who has written a bunch of books talking about the wonder and power of his patron god, Lord Dagon. This mythic dawn cult is bad news and sounds like the sort of people who would summon demons to destroy a city and kill the Emperor and all of his heirs. This revelation kicks off a Da Vinci Code-esque investigation that leads us in the sewers with Boris meeting a sponsor for this cult. I sort of botch it because I have trouble controlling my bloodlust, but no worries. We make it through and recover the last piece of evidence that details the map leading to their secret hideout. We get the location and head to the hideout, where we have the option to slip in as a new recruit, but once again, bloodlust, so I just go in shooting.
What?
We interrupt a ritual Mankar Cameron is conducting and he slips into a portal with the Amulet of Kings, but we manage to make off with this evil-ass book, slaughtering his entire congregation in the process. We give the book to Martin, who rightfully scolds us for being so cavalier and swiping the thing in the first place. But it turns out Martin dabbled in the dark arts during his edgy teenage years before becoming a wholesome priest, so he's uniquely qualified to dig through the book and figure out how to make a portal to get to the paradise Cameron built using the magic of Lord Dagon. While Martin scries the evil book, we gotta help Joffrey tie up some loose ends regarding some spies that have been skulking around Bruma to the south. It's a very straightforward quest that's just a vehicle to reveal that the Mythic Dawn have plans to turn Bruma into Kvatch 2.0, which I wouldn't really care if they did anyway because Bruma's a pretty lame-ass city. But Joffrey is concerned by the news, I guess not having expected our enemy, who literally destroyed an entire city with barely any effort, would try the same trick a second time. How Joffrey got to be the Grandmaster of a massive Imperial spy organization is beyond my comprehension because he's the most clueless person in the entire story. Seriously, he's blindsided and outsmarted at every turn and continuously underestimates the organization that has been consistently doing this since the beginning of the game. Martin, on the other hand, is actually a pretty decent character, but right now he's just got his nose in a bunch of books, so it's up to us to do the things that need doing. Speaking of which, Martin finally figured out what the deal is with the portal. He deduces we will need some ingredients to cook one up for ourselves, and periodically he will decode another ingredient, but for the time being he tells us that we need the blood of a Daedric prince. This means we gotta do one of the shrines to get one of their trinkets that's technically a piece of their essence, which would qualify for the sake of the portal. I opt to get Sanguine's Rose because it's generally just a useless item and the quest is easy. With that crossed off the list, it's now time for the optional quest I mentioned earlier. It's clear an attack on Bruma is imminent, so Joffrey wants us to go to each of the cities and enlist their aid in defending Bruma when the time comes for the cult to launch their assault. Kvatch might have been caught off guard, but that won't be the case with Bruma. Granted, I'm not sure what sort of chance Joffrey thinks a handful of guards will have against an army of demons and a massive fire-spewing siege engine, but he thinks this is vital to our success. Being a glutton for punishment and wanting to endure the full Oblivion main story experience, I agree to do it. Unfortunately, every city is being inconvenienced by an Oblivion gate outside their walls at this very moment and sadly cannot spare the men to defend Bruma. If someone were to take care of the gate, then they would reconsider. Being the only person in Cyrodiil capable of closing a gate, it seems like it's just up to us to do it. So I showed you the intended way to close the gates, now let me show you the sane way to close the rest of them. With all the gates threatening the major cities dealt with, we got the aid for Bruma, and Joffrey can sleep easy tonight knowing we solved his problems. I don't really know what's preventing them from just opening more gates outside the cities, but let's not give them any more reasons to send us back into those gates, please. The next stretch of the main story is really just lackluster fetch quests and mostly uninspired dungeons as we grab the remaining ingredients needed for the portal to Paradise. We need the Great Sigil Stone from the giant gate the Mythic Dawn wants to open to summon their giant siege engine, which means letting them open the portal outside Bruma. Meanwhile, Martin and Joffrey will mount a defense while we run through the gate and get the stone, as we are now uniquely qualified for the job, having done it a dozen times at this point. Relatively speaking, this part of the questline becomes kinda sorta almost fun. In fact, from this point on, the main quest manages to get just a little bit interesting. Not a lot, mind you, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, but now that the obligatory dungeon crawling is out of the way, it's not too bad. We get a little in-game cutscene where we meet the Countess of Bruma and Martin in his Imperial Dragon armor looking all Emperor-like. And then we get a short walk to the battlefield where all of Bruma's 6 citizens come out and cheer on the Emperor. All jokes about Bethesda's inability to have many NPCs on screen at once aside, it's kind of a cool moment. It makes you feel like you're actually a part of something finally. Like all you were doing is finally accounting for something. That your actions have some sort of impact on the world. It's sort of mind-numbing that we've been on a quest that deals with the fate of the entire world, and not until now did any of it feel like it tied to an actual world. It all felt like it was happening in a vacuum. Even in Cloud Ruler Temple, nobody really responded to anything we were doing. Everything just felt so static. And while that feeling is going to return before too long, it's nice to have this moment where we get some recognition from the bigger game world that we exist and what we are doing matters to people. So we go down to where the gates are set to open because we now have that power somehow, and Martin gives a little speech. It's a very generic one-note thing, but Sean Bean excels at this sort of work, and brings the uninspired lines to something resembling stirring because his delivery is so spot on. His voice work alone highlights this bit of character development for Martin, which might make him feel like the only character in the entire game with actual development. When compared to the speech he gave at Cloud Ruler Temple upon arriving and his diminutive response when we told him that he's the heir to the throne, it's another cool moment. It's at this point where I start to feel like this isn't so much a story about how I'm saving the world, but that I'm helping Martin save the world. and helping him grow into his role as Emperor. I'm going to come back to that point later, so try and hold on to that impression. So the speech finishes just in time for the gates to start spawning, and all the guards we worked so hard running through Oblivion gates to secure help hold the line as waves of Daedra come flooding in. There's really no risk of losing this fight with all these guards here. I think Martin is not essential for this fight, so he can get killed and it would result in a GG game over. But with all these NPCs, the heat is kept off Marty as we wait for the big gate to open. Once it's up, in we go. We're given a very generous time limit to run through this abbreviated Oblivion gate. It's a cool moment seeing that engine we saw in the opening cutscene now in real time. It's still an Oblivion gate though, so the whole thing still kinda sucks, but it's mercifully short and straightforward, so at least there's that. We snatch the giant sigil stone and we are transported back to the battlefield where the siege engine collapses on the ground dead somehow, even though it wasn't even close to the exit. I guess they wanted to capture that feeling of, wow, that was close. Except we are like a mile from the Bruma City walls, so that thing would have had to crawl a painfully long way up frozen cliffs to make it to the city, making me question why would they open these gates so far from the city walls when the Kvatch gates opened up almost inside the city itself, but I really gotta stop asking these sorts of questions. Joffrey died for me during the battle, and I almost feel something resembling sadness, and maybe I would have reloaded to try and keep him from dying if he was more than a one-note character. But he's not, so I didn't. Boris managed to survive, which is kinda nice because despite him having some questionable judgment, I grew fond of him during our time playing detectives trying to get into the Mythic Dawn. But this is pretty much the last time any of the Blades characters will play any sort of role in the story, so we might as well say our goodbyes now. Back at Cloud Ruler Temple, Martin opens up the gate to Paradise now that we've got all the ingredients for our own portal, and away we go. Paradise is one of my favorite locations in Oblivion. It would have been great if we could have visited it or something like it at will, because it's different enough to feel fresh but familiar enough not to be out of place in Oblivion. As Mankar Cameron describes it, it's how Tamriel was during the Age of the Elves. A picture of the past and his planned future. So I guess he's a regressive boomer who thinks the old days were the better days and the only way forward is backward. I don't know, who cares? He's such an underdeveloped antagonist I truly cannot fathom any of his motivations. He starts talking in our head now as we stroll through his paradise, spouting nonsense that would have been much better to have gotten earlier in the game so we could have had time to unpack and process everything he's talking about. But the game just heaps all of it onto us as we are distracted by the pretty landscape and trying to figure out where to go. It's one of the worst treatments for an antagonist I've ever experienced. I'm sure a lot of what he's saying is just reworded stuff from his books, but the last place I want to get an antagonist perspective is through lengthy walls of written text. A great antagonist has charisma and personality, and they sway you with their gifts of speechcraft. You know what they're saying is lies and whatever else, but you start to doubt your own convictions because they are speaking with absolute certainty and authority, lending it a sense of credibility. None of that works if it's written in essay format. You can absolutely convey those things if it's written dialogue. I'm not saying you can't have compelling antagonists in written words and need a voice actor like Terrence Stamp to sell it, but reading a wall of monologue text isn't going to do the trick. Basically, show me the charisma and genius of the antagonist, don't narrate it to me. And by the time we hit Paradise, it's way too late. We come across a Daedra who actually speaks to us rather than kills us, and this is probably more interesting and noteworthy than the guy we are coming to kill. He expresses his people respect us for slaying so many during the Siege of Kvatch, and he'd be honored to fight us or bargain with us into servitude. This guy whose name I won't even pretend to try and pronounce gives us some very cool insight into the race that we've been slaughtering the entire story. Once again, would have been great to have gotten this development, say, during the Siege of Kvatch, but it's at least more subtly done here as opposed to the info dump from Cameron. It's just enough to get us to start thinking about the culture of the Dremora, who clearly place a huge importance on honor and dignity, and you get the sense that they are a very intelligent and sophisticated species. We'll never get answers to those questions in this game, but it's a fun mind tease. Appreciating the food for thought this Daedra has given me, I agree to do the favor for him in exchange for helping me escape from the first stage of Paradise. It's a very simple, go here and activate this object, but it's funny hearing these people complain when I do it. Once again, it's reinforcing the ideas of Dremora honor, and I kinda dig it for a 2-minute diversion. It makes me sad thinking about the potential for there to have been more of this if they had just devoted the time earlier in the story to do it. But it is what it is. We go into the Forbidden Grotto, which is this giant maze of torture fetish devices for immortals who didn't appreciate the gift Lord Dagon bequeathed them. So they get to be tortured for all eternity instead. This section of the game bugged out for me hard, so the whole sequence just fell apart as the scripts weren't triggered correctly. But the gist is we meet one of the torturers who regrets what he's done and this hell he now is subjected to and wants to help us end it. So we go around LARPing as another victim of his until we manage to sneak out of the cave. But like I said, it was all bugged for me, so I just had to run through, and I think he got bodied by some Daedra early on, and that was that. Saved me some time, so I'm not too pissed. We then run into the guy who was supposed to be our sponsor to get into the Mythic Dawn when we were in the sewers with Boris, and no, I didn't remember him, that's just what the wiki says, because who the fuck would remember this guy? He's all like, behold the power of my father, and I don't know, maybe Mankar Cameron truly is his father since they got the same last name? Okay, who cares? He escorts us into the big empty palace, and my game hasn't stopped bugging out yet because suddenly everyone has a heart attack at the same time, and I guess I won because the whole world is collapsing. Don't worry, even if this hadn't happened, this fight is a joke and is over in only a few seconds. So we snatch all the goodies off their bodies, making sure to get the Amulet of Kings because, oh right, that was the whole point of all of this, and we are back in Cloud Ruler Temple. Very convenient. Martin is dressed in his imperial robes and puts on the amulet because boy, would it have been embarrassing if we got this far and realized he can't wear the amulet because he's not the true heir. But it does, and he says he believed us since we first told him back in Kavach and that we're best buddies now, and this is how we know he's gonna die because we have an actual emotional attachment to him and Bethesda isn't trying this hard to make us like the character if they aren't going to try and reap the ultimate payoff for that attachment. But that's getting ahead of ourselves, we gotta get to the Imperial City and light the fires. But first, I got a few errands to run. Maybe my new best friend won't mind joining me. Back at the Imperial Palace, the Elder Council recognizes Martin as the rightful ruler and agrees to his coronation. But wait! Lord Dagon is attacking the Imperial City directly because he had that power the whole time, and why the fuck didn't he just do this in the beginning? Why the whole drawn-out plot with Mankar Cameron and the Mythic Dawn and shit? I know the Dragonfires were a thing that needed taking care of. But surely once they were out, he could have just warped into the Imperial City and just got to destroying everything before anyone even knew the Emperor was dead. Why did he wait until I killed his biggest pawn and dismantled his cult? Why attack two cities with the siege engine, neither one posing a real threat? Why didn't he attack Coral with the siege engine instead? Why did he even need those Oblivion gates? A handful of cultists managed to make off with the amulet anyway. Why didn't he warp into Cloud Ruler Temple and wipe out literally the only group trying to stop him and kill the last remaining septum? Why? Why? None of this makes sense. This incredibly shaky story just completely falls apart once this happens, and I'm just left going, when will this be over? We then get an escort mission as the last part of this quest because why the fuck not? You can tell I've done this before because I tell Martin to stay put while I clear a way for him, and then pull some trickery to get him to spawn in the temple because fuck fighting endless waves of Daedra while performing an escort quest. And then Martin, the only character in Oblivion who's actually a character, goes,
I do what I must do. I cannot stay to rebuild Tamriel. That task falls to others. Farewell. You've been a good friend in the short time that I've known you. But now I must go. The dragon waits.
And then turns himself into a dragon because, like I said, they haven't been building this character up for nothing. No, he needs to die now to elicit some sort of emotional response out of us that isn't boredom or mild frustration. Too bad I still don't care about Martin that much, and really, all I care about at this point is just having this thing over. Lord Dagon is killed in a cutscene, which is probably a mercy because I don't want to know what sort of sick test of patience a boss fight with a Daedric Lord would be if Bethesda designed the sequence. And then we get our second pre-rendered cutscene of the game. Main story complete. We are left standing in the ruined remains of the temple, and the head of the Elder Council comes sprinting in asking where Martin is. When we tell him, you're looking at him, while eyeing the giant petrified statue of Akatosh's corporeal form, he gets the hint and goes, sucks we don't have an emperor again, but at least Lord Dagon is dead and will never threaten Tamriel again. I have no idea what gives you that impression, seeing as the Septon line is now vanquished, the Amulet of Kings is destroyed, and the monument for the Dragonfires has been blown to shit. But yeah, I guess we're safe now because you said so. He tells us we are now the champion of Cyrodiil and that we are going to get our very own Imperial Dragon armor, which is usually only for emperors, but we deserve nothing less. Okay, not a bad reward. Though my favorite reward is people just calling me champion when they see me on the streets and asking what it was like to watch Martin turn into a goddamn dragon right in front of me. It's that sort of impact on the world that I feel like so much else in this game is lacking. Like I keep saying, that's a topic for the conclusion. Let's just wrap up the story. It's really underwhelming. I mean, really underwhelming. I haven't played anything predating Oblivion, though I've heard excellent things about Morrowind's story. But I can say with some authority from Oblivion onward, Bethesda just can't make a good story in their games. They seem to conflate epic story with main story, and that mindset right there poses a really dangerous problem for these sorts of games. The entire story seems to have this identity crisis, where at first we seem to be the supreme agent of its narrative. Everything is happening because of us. But slowly, and by slowly I mean almost at the drop of a hat, events shift from us to Martin, and suddenly the main quest actually starts to open up. Characters are allowed to develop a tiny bit, the world is reacting to events, we're learning for the first time, even if it's all crammed into a 20-minute segment in a very rushed, half-assed sort of way. And if the story itself didn't collapse under idiotic contradictions to the rules the story has been beating into our heads the entire time, it would have ended maybe in a satisfying way. Martin didn't need to die. We didn't need to have Lord Dagon invade Tamriel and just... Bethesda thought because this is the main quest, all this epic shit needs to happen all the time, and that's just not the case. The main story should ideally interact with as many elements of the world as possible. Maybe tie in some of the guilds and give you a chance to be introduced to them in a more direct manner. The world is so rich in detail, and the main story uses almost none of those elements. Racial differences, cultural differences, the extreme diversity of Cyrodiil's locales, the different guilds and factions, the different playstyles, the extensive history of the world. All of this is there, already in the game, and none of it is utilized in the slightest in Oblivion's main story. Instead, we just get a rushed amusement park ride that gives us very little opportunity to interact with it, to become invested in it. And before we know it, it's over and leaves us with little to show except a blown-up temple district, some dead Oblivion gates out in the wilds, and people sometimes asking what it was like to see a dragon. Also, the Imperial Dragon armor sucks. Okay, moving on. Now, there really should be only one question left on your mind at this point. If I said the main quest in Oblivion wasn't that offensively bad, and I just railed on it for about a half hour, then what in the hell is the worst? Well, you better strap in because you're about to find out. I'm not going to subject everyone to as meticulous of a look at the Mages Guild as I had the main quest, partly because a lot of the complaints I had about the story there are the same but amplified here. Also because a lot of the quests are just padded filler dungeon crawls. I had a lot of complaints about the main quest line, but too long ain't among them. The Mages Guild, on the other hand, has barely enough story content to create one engaging quest, and that weakness is then stretched to cover an entire 2 to 3 hour long quest chain. It's absolutely brutal. The worst part is that if you're a mage or you want to enchant items or you don't have the Wizard Tower DLC, going through some of the Mages Guild is mandatory. No other questline I feel is mandatory for a style of play, even the guilds geared towards certain styles. The Mages Guild is the only one, and with it being probably the worst experience of the entire game, it creates a very unfortunate arrangement. But just because I won't be going through each quest of the guild doesn't mean this is going to be a quick ordeal. Oh no, not even close. First, let's take a step back for a moment just to discuss the Mages Guild as a whole. The guild is split into two distinct segments, the Guild Halls and the Arcane University. The Guild Halls are local chapters of the Mages Guild found in each major city. They are meant to provide magical services to the community and make sure everyone is following the guild's best practices and policies. So no sordid magics like necromancy or enslaving people's minds or sacrificing people to Daedric cults or whatnot pop up. The Arcane University is the hub of the magic bureaucracy and is like the cool kids club for mages. Everyone wants to get in, but it's sort of an exclusive deal, or it's meant to be anyway. To get in, a prospective student, I guess you would call them, would need to collect a recommendation from every guild hall in Cyrodiil, which I could see why it would be a barrier to entry for anyone that isn't a vagabond adventurer such as ourselves. The university is meant to offer more opportunities for a mage to get better at magic, perform legitimate research, and become a career mage. Honestly, I really like the Mages Guild as a guild itself. Out of all of them, the Mages Guild has the most logical and obvious structure to it. There's ranks that kinda mean something some of the time, there's some leadership roles, experts of particular fields and subjects, and the split between local halls and university feels like a meaningful distinction in theme and in practice. Out of all the guilds, the guild halls here provide some great services to the player that can't be found elsewhere, or maybe just not as conveniently, mostly in the form of spell and alchemy vendors and skill trainers. The university itself provides more than a few useful benefits for a Magic player. I don't really begrudge the game for having the recommendation system or requiring the player to join to gain access to these things. Actually, I think Oblivion would have benefited more from stuff like this. But I think it would have been better if we only needed, say, 3 recommendations. Am I really to believe all the people here traveled all over Cyrodiil doing tasks for these guilds while successfully avoiding death, disease, injury, and poverty? I gotta doubt that insinuation. But it is what it is. It's fine if the quests we gotta do are at least a little fun and rewards more than just a recommendation. But of course, this isn't the case. So let's look at these recommendation quests. There are 7 guild halls in total we'll need recommendations from throughout Cyrodiil, 1 in each major city aside from Kvatch, of course. Each guild hall specializes in a school of magic, with Bruma just being an oddball school. This distinction is useful if you're looking for a particular spell, say Destruction. Your best bet might be then to hit up the hall in Skingrad before anywhere else, because you'll probably find it there. But that distinction really has no influence on the actual recommendation quests themselves. Some of them might introduce you to some of the concepts of their school. For example, the Shaden Hall recommendation quest has you diving into a well to retrieve a ring, and it might behoove you to have a spell for water breathing and another spell for easing burden, both of which fall under Alteration, which is the school's specialty. While going back to the Skingrad example, you're given a level Destruction Fireball spell and told to clear out a cave of baddies, which is at least tangential to the ethos of the school. The Breville School of Illusion will deal with a lot of talking to people and give you some scrolls of charm spells, which is okay I guess, but the illusion skill has way more in it, and going around trying to find some girls as mage's staff because of some stupid middle school crush is not what comes to mind when I think of the potential for illusion. But then you got the School of Restoration and Anvil's quest that just has you hunting down a rogue mage, and by hunting down I of course mean you're acting as bait because that's what this guild does with its initiates. Leywin's quest tasks you with tracking down this amulet that keeps the voices in the guild hall leader's head from making her crazy and incapable of functioning. I guess this could be stretched to making you think about mysticism, as that school is tied loosely with the concept of reality and sanity, but I mean, that's a stretch. Turns out an underling was mad she had a condition that makes her need the amulet to function, so he jacks it and we gotta find another. What a dick. The Choral School of Conjuration, I don't even know what that connection is. We gotta make sure this lady doesn't get a certain book because it contains all sorts of power, and we are just meant to accept purely at face value the testimony of the hall leader. Okay, it's a guild, there's a command structure, so I guess I can buy into it. The game gives you the option to give her the book anyways, but you gotta get it back before completing the quest, so it's not actually a choice for you to make. And still, what does the book have to do with summoning creatures to fight for me? Maybe it's meant to represent the moral dilemma the guild faces because conjuration is a little close to necromancy and there's some grayness here and there's people attracted to the magic for the power it offers? I don't fucking know, I'm just trying to come up with something because otherwise it feels like we're doing shit because we're told to. The more we can become active participants in the story and not just passengers, the better, but these quests make that a real exercise of mental gymnastics in order to pull off. Bruma's quest just has you trying to find one of the members of the hall who is playing a prank on the leader of the hall because she's a terrible mage and apparently only got her position because she sucked up to the bosses in the Arcane University. Okay? This quest I get is meant to be intentionally bad in the sense it's supposed to make the guild seem less than ideal. The guy who inducts you into the university proper even calls attention to this fact. But we already got a taste of that in the Shaden Hall quest where the guild leader tries to have us killed like the other initiate he sent down into the well whose body we find down there. And then the second in command of the hall tells us she had a big argument with the guy and we find black soul gems hinting that he was dabbling in necromancy. And we even get some foreshadowing. So clearly whoever designed this quest knew what the bigger stakes of the quest line were going to be, and managed to work in the idea that the guild is not as unified and idyllic as the guild wants people in Tamriel to believe. They managed to do that in an albeit very abbreviated manner, but hey, it's at least effective and creative. The Bruma recommendation quest is just insulting in that we are treated like some dumb lackey pawn who is just here to cover the messes of other people's immaturity and incompetence. And believe me, that quest will not be the only one that gives that impression. Eventually we get all 7 recommendations and is off to the university to gain entry officially. Just like in real life, there's no fanfare, just an often repeated set of words, some robes, and a task we need to complete. I'm so happy though that they don't make us go on some inane tour of the university as though this space is so big and complicated that we need to have our hand held because that's what you get when you go to a university in real life. I mention this because this was one of the first things I noticed in Skyrim about their Mages Guild. They made me pull a let's show you the campus and introduce you to everyone, and I'm like, fuck, just let me go on with it. This college is only 3 buildings, I think I can figure it out. Joining the Arcane University was the perfect opportunity for Bethesda to do the same, and thankfully we were spared that 5-minute time waste. So I could have gotten up to this point, finally making it to the Arcane University without being a mage character. In fact, I could have never casted a spell in this game. At no point during the recommendations was I required to use magic. Some of them might have been made a tiny bit easier using magic, but it was never mandatory. The reason being I think is pretty obvious just after finishing the recommendations. Bethesda designed these guilds so that anyone of any build or playstyle can play through all the content. They didn't want to punish players for playing a particular way and locking them out of content. But here's the thing, the Dark Brotherhood, which is a guild of assassins, and the Thieves Guild, which by its name is pretty obvious what they are about, while sort of trying the same thing, kinda ignore that directive anyway. You can try doing those guilds without being a stealth character, but it's going to require a lot of tactics that will ruin the experience. And you're going to have some boredom and frustration as a result. Being stealthy makes those guilds easier and, more importantly, a lot more fun. The Mages Guild has none of that. You can bring your magic to the table with them and the game goes, oh that's cute, but no seriously, we got a cave of necromancers that needs clearing out. It doesn't matter in the slightest if you're a mage, an axe swinger, or a bow slinger. The recommendations had you playing the role of an intern, not a mage, and the university proper will have you playing the role of the browbeaten office drone who was hired after being a good intern who knew how all the bosses liked their coffee, and not because they were exceptionally qualified. I mention this because at this point the aptly named Raminus Polus, which, I mean, come on, that's some sort of insinuation if I ever saw it, tells us that the Arcane University is different and, well, to spoil things, it's not. We are still not going to be required to bring our own magical talents to the table, and if that's still the case, then no, this shit isn't going to get any better.
You do not yet qualify for further advancement in the guild.
In the spirit of that, we are tasked with going and making our own mage's staff, because it's a symbol of status and membership of the guild, and seeing how much trouble we went into recovering the girl's staff in Breville, we're led to think this thing is a big deal around here. Does that mean we will actually need this thing sometime later on? Will we need it to help us progress in a quest or complete tasks? And no, I just end up selling the thing once the quest is done. We go to the special grove where the mages tend to the special trees that yield the special wood to make our special staffs, and it's supposed to be an exciting and fun thing. But then we get introduced to what Bethesda truly thinks is fun for players. Fighting necromancers. Okay, I will admit, necromancers are actually one of the more fun enemies in Oblivion to fight. They got a pretty diverse pool of spells they can use, doubly so if they spawn with a staff, and they will drop some menacing summons from time to time. I also like that I can sneak kill them with my bow so damn effectively, and they aren't immune to any damage types or poisons, so we can fight them any way we so choose, which is more exciting than generic creatures who just charge at you, and Daedra who do the same. Necromancers will retreat and try their 2006 Bethesda AI best to throw down traps and outsmart you. But that doesn't mean fighting them exclusively non-stop for an entire questline keeps them engaging. You'll grow tired of them very quickly. So we single-handedly clear out the cave, only to then get into a big brawl in the grove itself. It's not a bad sequence, but underwhelming for sure. It's more disappointing that we are denied any sort of chance of actually learning something about the guild, as that's what I was hoping this quest was going to do when I first played it back in 2007. Instead, we get a veiled dungeon crawl and an introduction to the main antagonist of the questline, which was foreshadowed during the Shaden Hall recommendation quest. It just seems premature to have them already being introduced when we still have no real attachment to the guild since we've been given no reason at all aside from the name of the guild itself. This could have been the chance to add some personality to the guild, maybe introduce the first character in the guild to treat us with some dignity. Maybe the mages of the grove are just humble druid types who don't think much of the hoity-toity bigwigs back at the university. But no, none of that. Bethesda really believes in the inertia of the thrill of, wow, this is the Mages Guild and I'm a mage, wow, this is so cool, I'm part of a real college, I even got robes and I'm going to have a staff, so cool. We still get the wood because, you know, reporting the murder of our colleagues takes backseat to making sure we get our sweet symbol of supreme mage status. With the unenchanted staff in hand, now we go back to the guild to report what happened. Ramrod is heartbroken for about 10 seconds, and then tells us to finish making our staff. God, the tonal dissonance in this whole thing is unreal. It's shocking how blatant it is, almost as if the quest was actually 2 quests that got collated into one at the last minute and they didn't have time to smooth the dialogue over. I know I keep beating a well-beaten horse, but it's just everywhere. And the quests up until this point have been so mind-numbing already that all I can help but notice is the complete lack of self-awareness. Lack of self-awareness is really the only way I can summarize what we are tasked with next. Sensing the guild is in danger, Ramrod wants us to head to Skingrad and retrieve a book that was loaned to Count Hasseldor. Immediately the premise is suspect or just plain stupid, but I'm learning to stop questioning and just let events happen. So it's off to Skingrad to meet with the vampire Count, which is always a pain in the ass because we gotta talk to his advisor who will then go summon the Count because the Count will want to handle this matter personally. The advisor eventually tells us, yeah, we can't have this meeting here for some reason. Go meet him in a field in the dead of night outside of town, okay? I've had suspicions I've been getting misled since the start of this quest, but sure, I'll meet you out there since I sure as shit don't have any other options, and oh no, it's an ambush. The best part of all this is Hasseldor popping up out of nowhere like fucking Houdini and being the only person with any sense in all this because he basically starts calling us a moron for thinking we'd meet him under these circumstances. I really hate having characters insult my actual intelligence by assuming I'm as dumb as the limitations of the game force me to behave. And considering the weird dissonant commentary Bethesda seems to be peddling with the Mages Guild now, I take it as a personal insult because I can't help but feel this is all meant to be a joke we are supposed to be in on at this point. Hasseldor tells us there is no book. We were misled by the guild to spy on him, but fortunately he has his own house in pretty tight order and already suspected his advisor of being in cahoots with the Necros. He used us as bum-bait to lure him out so he could kill him and be rid of his treasonous ass. He tells us to basically tell our guild to grow a pair and accuse him directly if they suspect him of being a necromancer, rather than sending some lackey under false pretenses to spy on him. I just don't know what the guild is hoping to achieve with this whole thing aside from pissing off one of their most reliable allies, because seeing as we were led to think this was about a book, we would never have thought to, do some actual spying. What were they planning on doing? Just asking us how the Count looked that day? Was his face paler than normal? Did his red eyes have an evil glint in them? Also, if there was no book, surely this whole thing would have fallen apart. What was the best possible outcome here? We go, hey Hasseldor, you got this book? And he goes, nah man, they must have rented it to another vampire Count. Oh, okay, no problem bro. Hey, nice hair by the way, dig the ropes. I just don't get it. So we tell Ramrod what happened, and he's like, he saved your life? Shit, that's more than I would have done. Well, that's good, right? You can't possibly be a traitor. Oh, sorry I lied to you and put you in mortal danger to issue a political insult to a powerful and potentially dangerous man. How about a field trip to make it up to you? So it's off to a set of ruins of the Allied variety. I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe we will get to do some real Mages Guild shit finally? I mean, that's what I thought back in 07. I know better now. Because this is the quest where it really dawned on me. This whole guild quest line is a sick joke played at the player's expense. Bethesda tipped their hand just a little too much with this one, and that's when I went, fuck, this guild is shit, and it's intentional. We are greeted by Scaleel, who is currently sulking in these dingy ruins because Erlov, one of the bigwigs sitting on the Council of Mages, is too full of himself to come and see the project himself, so he sends someone who doesn't really know anything to assist. She takes it as an insult because she seems to be a very sensitive personality type. In more clinical terms, I'd say she's at the peak of Mount Stupid of the Dunning-Kruger effect. She insists she's got real talents that are being wasted here, but considering I've yet to meet someone who actually exhibits any sort of talents or competence, or even has a pleasant personality, I'm led to doubt Scaleel here is any different. Farther down in the ruins is the assistant who is just standing there awkwardly staring at the pillar he's supposed to be studying. Upon being prompted, he informs us that there are some inscriptions around the room that probably relates to the pillar, but he doesn't understand the language and needs a book to translate. Which they have in the ruins, but he doesn't want to talk to mean old Scaleel. Really, bro? Have you never had a job before? So, already fed up with the sheer absurdity that these two numbskulls have been put in charge of an expedition, particularly an expedition in which several mages have already been hurt trying to figure out the pillar, I approach Scaleel. She gives us the book, but promises she's going to get blamed when our attempts inevitably fail, and I just want to incinerate her to end her suffering at this point. Back at the pillar, we solve the puzzle all in about 20 seconds because not only did they have the manual to solve the puzzle, they also had all the spells in a convenient chest right here. It's like someone here already solved the problem, and then left because letting these two idiots access whatever is being hidden beneath a giant ancient elven locking device is probably way too dangerous for them. I wouldn't even trust them with a pestle and mortar after what I've seen from them. After carrying them the last 10 yards to the goal line, the assistant goes, "Hey, do you want to go down and see what's in there? I mean, I wouldn't want to steal your thunder and all that. If there's great discoveries to be made, you should be the one to make them." To that, my eyes just narrow and I think to myself, and if there aren't any discoveries to be made and it's just a dungeon filled with powerful and deadly ancient monsters that scared even the aliens, who did deals on the regular with Daedra, mind you, so they sealed it up for centuries. If that's the case, pray tell, will you be behind me to back me up? You know what, on second thought, I don't need you casting spells into my back and alerting the entire dungeon to our presence, so just stay here and guard the entrance. And it's an undead-infested dungeon, who'da thunk? We clear it out and find an elven helmet we can't equip and then bring it back to Skalil, who just goes, "Wow, that looks important. You should bring it back to the college because I have no idea what it could possibly be." Thank you, I appreciate the assistance. We bring it back to Erlof, who is just as clueless as Skalil, and I'm not even surprised anymore. He boots us back to Ramrod, who sends us on a mission to figure out what the deal is with black soul gems. So you mean to tell me you guys have known about these things for all this time? Like, the lady in the Shadenhall Guild seemed to have a good idea what they are and what they are tied to, and nobody has thought to investigate it until I became available. I'm not even surprised anymore. We go to the Mystic Archives, where the woman who took 2 days to figure out the big brain scratcher of a mystery back during the main quest that the first bolded letter of each paragraph in Mankar Cameron's commentary spelt out a secret passage is hard at work being overwhelmed. She immediately bites our head off for even showing up, and thankfully my expectations are subverted when I think a part of this quest will involve finding books and waiting around while she gets to reading them. But we just ask about black soul gems and she goes, "Oh yeah, nobody ever asked about that. There's a book in the corner there that will tell you about them." So the answers to a very important question is just sitting there, and I'm not even surprised anymore. We learn of the location of an altar used for a necromancy ritual, so we head over there, being the only person in the guild with functioning legs. And we just sit here watching the wait timer ticking down until eventually one night something happens and we watch a necromancer make some black soul gems. We go back to the guild and report what we saw, and mission accomplished. We learn we will no longer be getting jobs from Ramrod, but instead Archmage Travin himself. He's much less condescending and patronizing than Ramrod, but twice as clueless, and it really makes sense why the guild is the way it is with this dope in charge. He tasks us with finding an informant who has been looking into the necromancer cult living among them. Now Traven fears for his safety, as he should be. I don't think the cult is nearly as incompetent as the guild, and that's a dangerous thing to be betting against. We go to his last known whereabouts to meet up with some battle mages who are supposed to help us rescue the informant. Surprise, all but one are dead.
Follow me.
We go to his last known whereabouts to meet up with some battle mages, but there are no survivors. And it's up to us to clear out the necromancer-infested dungeon. We clear it out, and oh, they turn the informant into a zombie. Well, that sucks. Guess it's just time to mercy kill him. What a waste of a quest. Literally, nothing was gained, only my time was wasted. We go back to Travin, and he gets over the news pretty quickly. He tells us we gotta go back to Skingrad and get some info from Hasildor, who by now has got to be more than annoyed with our constant pestering. Whatever, we go out there and Hasildor says he'll tell us, but we gotta do something for him. Surprised, he asks? No, not in the slightest. I'm not surprised by anything in this fucking questline anymore. He wants us to clear out a cave of vampires, but more importantly get rid of a band of vampire hunters because it's bad for business having vampire hunters in a city run by a count who is a vampire. Turns out these vampire hunters are complete dicks for whatever reason, so we send them to the cave with the vampires where they proceed to kill each other but ultimately die because vampires in this game are no joke if you aren't expecting them.
Is that so? Well, perhaps we'll have to pay them a little visit. Thanks for the tip, friend.
I play cleanup, looting them all for some nice stuff, and report back to Hasseldor. He tells us Mannimarco, the King of Worms, is back. If you're fresh on your Elder Scrolls lore, then you'll know this is one bad hombre. He's the arch nemesis of the Mages Guild, and having him back when the leadership of the guild is less than stellar is a problem for sure. Trevin's response is just classic.
I had, perhaps foolishly, believed that necromancy was all but stamped out in Cyrodiil. It seems I couldn't have been more mistaken.
Yeah man, you really couldn't have been more wrong. He tells us to go to Bruma to see what's up with the guild hall over there because he hasn't heard from the busybody guild hall leader, which is unusual. You remember Jean, the bad mage we were roped into playing a prank on. We go to the guild and find it's torched and full of stun-locking wraiths. This quest would have been a whole lot shorter if we didn't have to fight these things. But we find Jaskar, the prankster from earlier, who is now just a traumatized cat having watched his guildmates killed and had their souls eaten by the King of Worms. This quest would have been a lot more effective if they hadn't destroyed the guild hall that was the site of one of the lamest quests in the entire chain. If I was supposed to feel some sort of emotion having seen this, then, well, it didn't work. The Bruma Guild Hall didn't even serve a useful purpose. Sucks to suck, I guess. We report back, and once again Traven gets over his grief quite quickly, realizing the gravity of the situation, I suppose. Once again, this was just a pointless quest, because we already knew the King of Worms was back. What would have been more effective is if we just didn't even have the quest before where Hasseldor tells us that Mannimarco is back, instead we learn from Jaskar. That would have had at least a tiny bit more emotional something, and we could have ended the quest with some new information. Instead, Bethesda spilled the beans too soon and this quest just falls completely flat. Well, it turns out Traven's leadership skills are seriously lacking. We are told to come back after a couple of days as the council debates what to do. And in that time, the council collapses and everyone takes their favorite toys and runs off to hide in their dungeons. And you know what that means? More necromancer dungeons. So we are sent on not one, but 2 fetch quests, as if this quest line needed any more filler. Fortunately for all of you, I don't think this video needs any more filler, so I'm going to gloss over them quickly. One dungeon is just that, a necro dungeon. Kill the baddies, get the helmet, find out the idiot Erlof got himself killed, done. The second one is a little more nuanced, and I mean little as literally as I can. We get to the dungeon and find it's full of mages just sort of standing around eyeing us with the same enthusiasm we will find elsewhere. But here in these ruins it just feels unnerving. I mean, more so than usual. Knowing what I know and thinking myself clever, I decide to start killing all these mages. I know they all turn on us because, of course they will. With them all dead, we confront the lady who made off with the artifact, who at first thought we had come to join them in defecting to the necromancer cult. I don't really get why so many people are willing to defect to such an unknown cause. Do all these people really want to just play with dead bodies that much? I don't get it, and our enemies' motivations are never explained, except the King of Worms, who just wants to destroy the guild because that's been his fetish for the past few centuries.
I'd like to have you mostly intact, so Mannimarco can suck the marrow from your bones.
Anyways, she turns on us, and so does her bodyguards. We kill them, get the amulet back, and prepare to stroll out of the dungeon unaccosted, but the game goes, nah, not so fast. You thought you tricked me, and wouldn't you know it, all the mages we killed are respawned as necromancers now. I'm seriously just not even remotely surprised anymore. We gotta kill them all over again before leaving. We bring the items back to Traven, who is just beside himself. Erlof is dead, and one of the council members was a necro the entire time. He wants us to go to a special ruin to get a colossal black soul gem that has been prepared for Mannimarco to carry out his evil plans. So we go there and find 3 battle mages who had been scoping the place out waiting for an opportunity to attack. We are put in charge of dictating their tactics, and I just have no idea why this was even something they bothered to write in script. It's just so stupid. They each explain what method of combat they are most effective with, and we are given a choice to have them be close to the entrance of the place or hang back. This isn't a real brain scratcher. One says she's good with an axe, one says she's good with long-range spells, and the other says he's good with swords and healing spells. Even if you screw up somehow, who really cares? Once we get the chance, we head into the ruins, and then it's just yet another necromancer-filled dungeon crawl. We're actually hunting down the former head of the Shaden Hall Mages Guild, the one with the black soul gems. I guess they wanted to make this all come full circle or something, but honestly, I didn't even notice it was him until I read it on the wiki, so once again, who cares? Loot the big soul gem and head back to the guild for our final quest. Finally. As here Travin does something really unexpected, and I mean that sincerely. He sets himself on fire and kills himself, trapping his own soul in the gem because it was designed for his own soul. Doing this makes it so that we won't get turned into a thrall because who knows. He then promotes us to Archmage because it's the end of the questline, and that means we have to be made the head of the guild now. I've stopped asking questions at this point. Rest in peace, Travin. I'm sure you won't be missed. We go to Manimarco's hideout, the location of which I don't even remember having learned, but I guess that's just not important. What is important is going through yet another Necromancer cave. This one is extremely straightforward. We go to see the King of Worms who just stands there gloating, fails to turn us into a thrall, and very quickly gets his shit kicked in and dies. The end. We go back to the guild to tell Ramrod what happened, seeing as he's like the senior-most member left alive. He's like, oh, cool, Manimarco's dead. Shame about everyone else, but business as usual. Guess that means we both get promotions out of this, right? Oh, by the way, you're the Archmage now, which means jack shit. You can use the Archmage's quarters, and the chest in there duplicates alchemy ingredients. Okay, bye. That's the end of the Mage's Guild. Very climactic and satisfying. I have a lot of thoughts about the Mage's Guild, almost none of them positive. I'm more just dumbfounded by the entire thing from start to finish. It's all just so nonsensical, I almost don't know where to start. On the one hand, we got a very weak-ass, ancient, powerful necromancer trying to destroy the guild completely out of nowhere. And on the other, we have a guild filled with incompetents that seem to hasten their own destruction. The analogies to white-collar tedium and petty, corrupt, soul-crushing institutions are everywhere, to the point that I just think this was the whole point of the guild. They were supposed to be obnoxious, the quests were meant to feel like a waste. I just don't see any other conclusion that can be made. This questline is just so bad that it has to be aware of itself. And if that's the case, why on earth would they have gone with such a take? Was this just a rushed guild? Were they going to go with something else and it just got canned before there was time to make a new questline, so a self-aware commentary on the incompetence of major institutions was the best they could cobble together? That's my best guess, my only guess. Because in a game filled with mediocre quests, this whole chain was abnormally terrible. The structure of the guild, from all the smaller halls to the actual university, the recommendation quests to the main quests, none of this is inherently bad. It makes sense that a giant institution like this would have processes and stuff, but the fact that every second of it is one miserable slog with necromancer dungeon after the next dominating half the quests, the fact that you barely do anything that feels even related to magic, and instead has you playing the role of office intern. The quests don't even react to you using magic solutions, or even thoughtful solutions. A pure mage player or a player who refuses to cast even a single spell will have the exact same experience. What a waste of potential, and a waste of the player's time. Let's move on. The Fighters Guild is up next. I used to think it was the worst of the bunch, but after playing the Mages Guild again, no, it's definitely not the worst. It's close, but at least has moments. In truth, it's just incredibly bland and forgettable. I have no intentions of lingering on it to dissect every week dungeon crawl quest, so let's just blast right through it. Everyone likes to mention the first quest, A Rat Problem, as one of the standout quests in the line. This quest has you going to some crazy old bat's house in Anvil under the assumption that she wants to get rid of the rats in her basement. Well, you know what they say about assumptions.
That's right. Rats in my basement, and something has been killing them. It's horrible. My poor babies. You must do something. I don't know what I'd do without them. Their little pink noses, their scaly little tails. Please get to the basement and find out what's happening.
So we gotta get rid of the mountain lions killing her beloved rats.
If they're out here, they'll be in this area. I can't imagine there are more than 4 of them. Let's take care of this.
We get sent on a wild goose chase and eventually find out it was her neighbor who just wanted the rats gone. She didn't mean to lure mountain lions into town because, starving mountain lions prowling the streets are probably more dangerous than some domesticated rats locked in a basement. We end up saving the rats, and that's it. We collect our pay and go home. It's this sort of disconnected contract work that makes up the bulk of your time in the Fighters Guild. The Mages Guild felt like it was entirely filler from the first mission to the last. Nothing really stand out except for the quests that had some thin story tossed over it to make the dungeon crawls and boring errands feel connected. The Fighters Guild retains a lot of that legacy of filler content, but not to the same extent, and at least here it has some reasoning. The Fighters Guild are basically mercenaries, and a lot of mercenary work is just the oddball job some local needs help with. You do the job, you get paid, and it's on to the next job. We get our quests from 3 people in the guild: the leader of the Shade and Hole branch, the leader of the Anvil branch, and Modron, who I think is the second in command of the guild or something. I don't really know, mostly because the game gave me no reason to care about the structure of the guild at all. The Fighters Guild feels like a guild in name only. As much as I bitched about the Mages Guild, it at least felt like one. The structure made sense, there was a purpose to the halls, aside from the Bruma chapter, which gets torched anyway. The Arcane University centralizes the entire operation. Apparently, the Coral Hall is the main hall for the Fighters Guild, but that's only because that's where the Guildmaster's office is. It feels arbitrary, but the existence of the halls in general feel arbitrary. I don't know if we even go into the Guild Hall in Skingrad or Breville. Not only that, the halls really offer nothing except some trainers and a place to sleep. When it comes to accommodations, the Fighters Guild really offers nothing, and asks too much for us to believe that this is supposed to be a highly organized operation that has a lot to offer its members. The distinction between the 3 quest givers is important, because unless the quests are coming from Modron, the main story of the quest line isn't progressing. Modron's quests all revolve around a rival mercenary company moving into Leyawind, calling themselves the Blackwood Company. These guys are making a reputation for taking the shady contracts the Fighters Guild is too honorable and legitimate to touch. Unfortunately, this is costing the guild contracts, and our fellow guildmates are starting to feel that crunch. I can't really blame them. 100 gold for doing dangerous work is a joke of a reward. As you level up, that goes up, but because of how everything scales and is relative, we'll never be making worthwhile money from these jobs. And you can forget about special rewards like gear. This is a cash-only endeavor. But only Modron gives the interesting quests, because as it turns out, a rat problem is the only creative and interesting one you'll get that isn't a story quest. The rest are just half-baked dungeon dives for this manufactured reason or that. After coming out of the Mages Guild, these dungeon dives have gotten really stale. And when I say Modron gives the interesting quests, I only mean that relatively speaking. The quests still usually devolve into a dungeon crawl, but they at least are bookmarked by some thought-provoking dialogue. I mean that with the biggest asterisk possible. The mystery of the Blackwood Company is teased for way too long in an attempt to pad out the questline more. It starts picking up in the last hour or so of the questline, but gets interrupted by a couple more filler quests before reaching its conclusion. I'm not going to go through all the quests like I did for the Mages Guild, because really, there's just not much here. The guild is 80% unrelated side quests that are just not interesting in the least bit. Not to play, not to watch, and definitely not to discuss. A lot of the quote-unquote story quests just involve your guildmates complaining there's no work to do and that the Blackwood Company is stealing all the contracts. When we start to investigate the Blackwood Company, things finally start picking up, but that's not until the 11th hour of the questline. Anyway, we are sent to investigate the Blackwood Company after we kidnap and torture a Blackwood Company member by subjecting him to the speechcraft mechanics until he buckles. We find out they have a history in their haul from Blackmarsh, and they all drink its sap to give them strength. We are sent to go join up, which they don't question because people have been defecting from the Fighters Guild in droves recently because there's no work. So we get to take part in an initiation process and drink some of the hiss sap and black out, waking up in a village with a goblin problem. We slay all the goblins and pass out again, waking up in Modron's house, who tells us we were found by our Fighters Guild guildmates passed out in the street. So is the Blackwood Company onto us? If that's the case, why did they let us go? Or are they just in the habit of letting their members pass out on the streets after drinking hiss sap and doing a job? Once again, this just doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Modron says this doesn't make any sense, so we should go see the village. There's supposed to be a bunch of dead NPCs, but my game bugged out, so their bodies were gone. What happened was the hiss sap made the villagers look like the goblins I was killing, and I guess this explains how they get people to stomach doing the dirty work. But this is never reinforced because all the people we meet from the Blackwood Company are just total dicks who act like bandits, including the guy whose ass I tried protecting because he had fallen on hard times and had a family. He turns out to be a piece of shit and we are forced to kill him, I guess teaching us the important lesson to never be merciful in this game. But if I was to believe these guys needed hallucinogens to carry out their dirty work, the game failed to convince me. We're then sent back to the Blackwood Company to confront them and then destroy the Hiss Tree. It's a quick brawl that ends with us destroying the pump and lighting the tree on fire. It's a neat little scene that provides one of the few standout moments of the questline. The Guildmaster berates us and then promotes us because she realizes she's been a total dunce, and because of her inability to acknowledge the threat of the Blackwood Company, a lot of people died and her guild almost imploded. She does a smart thing and recognizes she's out of her element. Just like with the Mages Guild, apparently it's preferable for the guild to operate with an absent leader, aka the player, as opposed to someone who manages to make all the wrong calls all the time and doesn't realize until the guild faces a massive existential crisis. It's crazy that I spent 6 times the words talking about the Mages Guild as opposed to the Fighters Guild when I think the Fighters Guild is better. But that's just because the Mages Guild was so bad there was almost an endless amount to discuss. The Fighters Guild is just a bland collection of busy work. It's not insulting to the player's intelligence or anything, it just doesn't ask the player to believe in what it's setting up. It just exists, and it's done just as soon as it starts to overstay its welcome. There's really nothing to discuss about such a questline. So let's start talking about a guild that has a lot more going on. It's a bit of a toss-up between which guild is my personal favorite, the Thieves Guild or the Dark Brotherhood. I rank the Thieves Guild just a little bit lower because its story doesn't really get good until near the end, while the Dark Brotherhood is consistently great the whole way through. Regardless, I hold the Thieves Guild in extremely high regard, especially when compared to the previous 2 guilds and the main story in general. Unlike the previous 2 guilds, the Thieves Guild can't just be joined on a whim. For starters, they aren't even really a guild, as they don't have a guild hall or any real central leadership save for the Grey Fox and a few doyens. It's more like a network of criminal contacts that share information and coordinate for certain things, but they all cooperate and offer their protection to each other. It's a very cool and intelligent structure, and Bethesda actually portrays it exceptionally well. You're always meeting contacts in secret locations or in someone's house or in public with the guise of hiding in plain sight. It's a very exclusive club, but once you're in, you'll occasionally find someone in a city who recognizes you as a guild member and greets you with secret greetings and lots of innuendo to your shared membership. This illusion is not once, as far as I've ever seen, broken once it's established, and it makes the guild feel very consistent, and it's just very well executed. The Thieves Guild is all about mystery, secrecy, rumors, and misdirection. That tone is established before you even find the guild, and it stays true all the way to the end. So the first challenge is joining the guild in the first place. You may want to join even if you don't know about the questline and such, because NPCs will mention this is the best way to sell stolen goods, or you might see that tip on the loading screens. There's a few different ways to learn about and join the guild. My preferred way is just to get a bounty and then get caught and serve a sentence in jail. Once free, a representative will contact us after a little while and tell us about a meeting in the Waterfront District. Another way is to look at the wanted posters for the Grey Fox posted around the Imperial City and then ask NPCs and beggars until eventually one of them will spill the beans if they have a high enough disposition. Either way, the ticket is the meeting in the Waterfront District, which will only happen once we learn about it. We can't just go there one random night and wait. Once there, we are greeted by 2 prospective recruits and Armand Christophe, the local guild representative, or doyen as they are referred to in the guild. He proposes a contest to see who's the best thief, and whoever wins will be the one joining that night. He gives only 2 instructions: steal the diary of a local man living in the Imperial City, and do not murder anyone in the process. Everything else is up to us and fair game, including stealing the book from each other. The complete freedom to this quest is the first thing that immediately sets it apart from anything else we've seen yet. No other quest, especially guild quests, told us what it wanted us to get and specifically said the specifics are up to us to decide. This is not an anomaly. In fact, this will be the norm for both the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood going forward. In fact, the Thieves Guild has some of the most open-ended quests in the game, and this is the fairly obvious secret to why the quest worked so damn well. We managed to beat the other thief participating in this contest before she could snatch it, but even if she did manage to beat us to the punch, we would have had plenty of opportunities to steal it back from her. And even failing that, there would be a second quest that isn't a contest that just charges us with stealing a sword from a shopkeeper's house. Once again, another open-ended objective. But we were quick on the scene, and with the diary in tow, we head back to Christophe for entry into the guild. He inducts us into the guild proper and introduces us to the way things work in the guild. Starting off, we only have Ungar and Bruma to act as our fence. We can only sell our stolen goods to him and he's out of the way and low on gold. But we need to fence a certain amount of gold to unlock new quests in the guild, encouraging some independent thievery between quests. Of course, I'd just like to get it all done at once, knowing I only need 1k gold fence to unlock every quest in the game. So we spent a couple of nights raiding a few locations in the Imperial City and called it a day. But it's great that if you're playing an actual thief, the guild itself encourages more of it, as opposed to the Mages Guild, which is entirely ambivalent to whatever you do when not doing Mages Guild quests. Kristoff also can sell us lockpicks and pay off bounties at a discount, but I rarely rack up bounties and I got the skeleton keys, so lockpicks are a non-issue now. But still, it's neat to have an option like this built into the guild for this type of play. It gives tons of reasons for a thief player to join the guild and rank up. As you rank up, you gain access to more fences in different cities who all have more money. Kristoff then gives us our next job, which involves stealing tax proceeds and the relevant records from one of the biggest watch captains in the Imperial City. These funds were taken from the poorest people of the waterfront, who the Grey Fox intends to refund. This quest introduces us to one of the main antagonists of the Thieves Guild early on, Hieronymus Lex, and starts to set the Grey Fox up as more of a Robin Hood type than a career criminal, as the Imperial Guard is leading the people to think. This quest is more complicated than the previous, as it requires us to rob the city guards as opposed to some random dude's house. Rightfully so, this quest requires us to scope out the guard tower, which we are allowed to enter the first floor of, but none of the other floors without trespassing. Hanging around the first level lets us see the comings and goings of the different guards, and this is awesome because it uses Bethesda's Radiant AI to dictate when the guards change shifts. Using what we're seeing and a little logic, we pick a time that is a likely good time to get our sneak on, and we head up to the restricted areas. There's no quest marker to tell us where the item actually is hidden, so we gotta do some poking around to find the stash. We locate the documents and the gold in Lex's desk, so we swipe it and beeline it out of there. Stealing from the city guard is an audacious thing for a new thief to attempt, and while the quest isn't exactly that difficult, it still feels rewarding because of that context. Context such as this is what the other two guilds in the main story was so badly lacking, which is why none of what we'd been doing in those questlines felt like it mattered. It's incredible how much just a little context and rational motivation can elevate a simple quest such as this. Back at the waterfront, we give the goods to Kristoff and he's pleased. Next, he wants us to nick a statuette of a deceased woman in Shaden Hall for an unnamed buyer. Once again, simple premise, but all we are told is to go get the thing and don't kill anyone. The rest is entirely up to us. So the first order of business, as usual, is finding the location of the thing, which is easy enough to locate if we just ask a beggar about the statuette. We learn it's in the Chapel Undercroft, so that's where we head. The crypt itself is a rather simple location, but it's guarded 24/7, so sneaking is, as to be expected, the name of the game here. There's plenty of shadows and things to hide behind, so getting through is easy enough. Once we get the statuette, we just sneak back out and head back to the waterfront district. Upon arrival, we find the whole place is swarming with guards who are running around trying to find Kristoff, who has been accused of stealing the statuette. Clearly something is afoot, and upon asking some fellow thieves, they reveal Kristoff has gone underground to avoid arrest. This was all a ruse by Kristoff to flush out an informant in the guild, and now they know Mivrino Arano is compromised and she needs to be taken out. This being the Thieves Guild and not the Dark Brotherhood just means pinning the theft on her. We head to the waterfront and break into her house, planting the bust in her house, and then alerting Lex that she's the thief. Requires a lot of convincing, which for me just means bribing him because I got more money than the Pope at this point, and eventually Lex trusts us enough to at least go and check it out. He's very reluctant to believe us because Arano has been feeding him information for a while now, so it doesn't quite add up why she would be the thief. But when he gets there, he finds the bust and places her under arrest, assuming she was formulating some sort of conspiracy to cover her own misdeeds. With the informant in custody and the matter of the stolen bust now settled, things can continue as usual. We are rewarded and then told our time with Kristoff has come to an end and it's time for us to report to our new doyen in Breville. Skriva is our new quest giver in Breville, who likes to spend most of her days either reading at home or at the Lonely Suitor Lodge, living a rather unassuming life, all in an attempt to keep her role in the guild a guarded secret. It lends her character some interesting depth, which really didn't require much work on the developer's part, but makes Skriva seem like she has her shit in order and that's why she's in charge around here. Someone like this is someone I want to be working for, not an imbecile like Traven, whose greatest contributions to our efforts to save his own guild was killing himself. Skriva gives us a job. go to Leywin and help a former guild member deal with a freelance thief who stole a valuable ring from her. So we head over to the swampy city and start poking around until we find out where our contact, Adarji, is located. We find her and get the full scoop. An Argonian freelance thief, Amuse, stole the ring. She wants blood for this, but we aren't at liberty to oblige, so she just asks for us to make him suffer. Apparently Adarji has a hatred for Argonians, and other people in town will make mention of this from time to time, which is something I mentioned the game lacked in my previous video. I noted Oblivion was lacking in the racial tensions department. Little did I know the Thieves Guild of all places had this. So the designer of the Thieves Guild not only worked to make the guild itself fleshed out and logical, they also went out of their way to add some depth to their own characters to use them to create more depth in the world itself. That's some serious effort when, once again, none of the other quest lines up until this point even bothered to interact with the world, let alone add to that world. We go back to the beggars who mention Amuse has been arrested for trying to swindle a countess.
Yeah, we got him here. Argonians aren't allowed visitors, though. Countess Alicia's orders. She's the thing about the lizard folk. Amuse, you say? I thought you wanted to see Amude. He's off limits. Amuse, though, is just down the hall. Make it quick.
We gain access to the prisoner who turns out to be the Argonian we had met trying to join the Thieves Guild with us earlier. In exchange for a lockpick, he tells us that the ring in fact belongs to the Countess, so she locked him up after he tried to ransom the ring back to her, with the ring now in her possession again. We are supposed to go back to Adarji to avoid a quest-breaking bug, but I didn't know that and went straight to asking around the castle about the ring and the Countess. It's not a big deal, being on PC I was able to unstuck the quest when it did bug out, but I missed out on a conversation with Adarji when she said she'd buy the ring back from us if we managed to get it back, and that Amuse is a stupid lizard for trying to sell the thing because the ring lets Adarji read the secret letters of the Countess, which is information she then sells. So yeah, he done goofed trying to sell the ring off. Once again, we find ourselves dealing with a guild member who knows what she's doing and has a nice little gig going, proving this guild has its fair share of clever schemers and not just people who we are meant to believe are the best at what they do simply because they are members of the guild, and their credentials aren't meant for us to question. Anyway, in the castle we find a bribable mouth who tells us the Countess only takes the ring off when she retires for the night and places it in a jewelry box beside her bed. At least, this lady is supposed to be in the castle. But here's where the bugs start kicking in and she's wandering the countryside for some reason. She tells us the secret passageway into the private chambers of the Countess, the same passage that someone else says is used to transport Argonians to a torture chamber. So there's some serious racism towards Argonians in this town, once again, adding to the world. We sneak into the castle and use the passageways as described, but here's a quest-breaking bug, the ring isn't actually in the box. I eventually figure out my folly and just use some console commands to fix the quest, and away we go. Back to Adarji, who thanks us and hopes we made the filthy Argonians suffer, as she says. Personally, I got no problems with Argonians, but damn, does this make Leywin look like less than an ideal place for my lizard friends. Back in Breville, we get our reward and complete the quest. Our next job is sending us back to the Imperial City. Things with our old friend Hieronymus Lex is starting to heat up again. They are turning over the waterfront looking for the Grey Fox. Armand Christophe is under house arrest, and many of our fellow guildmates are either arrested or in hiding. We gotta make contact with one of the local thieves there and coordinate a retaliation. We meet up with Methridel, who is coordinating a giant synchronized theft spree. 5 high-profile thefts at 5 locations in the city at the same time. The logic being, Lex will be recalled to shore up security in those other parts of the city and won't have the resources to maintain the occupation of the waterfront. A neat little plan. Our involvement is to steal a staff from the Archmage's quarters, which is, well, we are the Archmage. So, okay. We are to steal from ourselves then. Yeah, this part wasn't very thought out, I guess. So we just walk into our own quarters, take the staff that wasn't there last time we were here, and then we leave a note in our own nightstand for nobody to discover. And then we just walk out, no questions asked. Well done, I guess. Methridel seems to think so and has us go to the waterfront and see when Lex gets recalled. So we do, and Lex is ordered back by the mages when a Dremora messenger appears. Not so subtle choice of messengers, especially considering we just had an Oblivion invasion and the guild was almost destroyed by necromancers who loved conjuring Daedra. Methridel then has us return the staff to the guild, but not by bringing it back to the university because that would arouse suspicion. Instead, we are to leave it in the house of a retired guild member and hope they receive the message that this was only business and the guild means no harm to the Mages Guild. Once again, we are the Archmage, so none of this would be a problem, but okay then. It's only a simple matter of asking the beggars where the mage lives, breaking into his house at night, and depositing the staff in a chest while he sleeps and slipping out. Once we're done, it's back to Breville for our reward. I don't know. I really like this quest on paper, but the execution is very wonky thanks to us being the Archmage. I get the feeling this quest was made before it was decided the player would become the Archmage. It actually makes me think the Mages Guild was one of the later questlines designed, maybe even the last, or maybe it was just undergoing a sudden redesign. Because I can't see someone taking what must have been days of work to make this quest without once someone going, hey, you know the player can be the Archmage, right? It would also explain why the Mages Guild was so shit, while the Thieves Guild was so good. If they made the Thieves Guild early on, it would have had more time before crunch rolled in. I have no evidence to back me up, just a hunch based off of a few quests, but it's not all unheard of for something like this to happen. And it's a pretty simple explanation for why we got such wildly different levels of quality in these quest lines. The next quest is a special one, relevant to the Grey Fox himself. Skriva asks us to go to Skingrad and look for a thief who has failed to complete his task. He was charged with stealing a book, but he never returned, and now they're sending us to find the book and the thief if we can. A quick word with the ever-knowledgeable beggars has us learning of the thief's arrest after he bragged about the heist at a bar, so once again we are in need of gaining access to the guarded dungeons of a castle.
We're a bit suspicious of strangers here. Don't give us anything to be suspicious about, will you please? No, but it will earn you 2 years in Skingrad's dungeon. Now get lost before I decide to report you.
Trying our luck to bribe our way in a second time yields much less success this time around though. It turns out there's a ton of ways to get to those cells. One way actually involves us getting hired as a servant in the castle. Unfortunately, I didn't know that this was an option, instead went with what my journal hinted at and got myself arrested for a petty theft.
Somebody, stop! You violated the law. Pay the court a fine or... Hope you rot, criminal scum.
Once inside, we see that there's only one prisoner here, and he's not the thief we're looking for. He tells us prisoners are taken by the Pale Lady, and our thief had been taken days ago and hasn't been seen since. Our recent Argonian prisoner was just taken and was bleeding as he was dragged off. So after serving our day in jail, we sneak back into the dungeons and begin following the trail of blood through the castle. The trail ends in a torture dungeon where the Pale Lady, who in fact turns out to be a vampire harvesting the blood of prisoners, attacks us. We slay her and find our dear old friend Amuse locked up again. Across the way is the corpse of our thief and no sign of the book. Amuse tells us he has a message the thief asked him to deliver to the guild if he was to die. We help Amuse escape the dungeons in exchange for the message, which turns out to be the location of the book he had stolen. It's weird to think that this is probably the first death of anyone or anything in this entire questline so far, and it was over a book. I was so used to slaying enemies and creatures in all the other quests and random NPCs dying here and there that I'd become numb to it and just stopped thinking about it. But the death of this thief, even with it happening off screen, actually has some weight and importance to it. It's a testament to the less is more approach to storytelling. Amuse says he's going to try joining the guild again, thanking us for sparing him from becoming vampire food. We go get the book and bring it back to our doyen in Breville, finishing the quest. It's time for Lex to go, according to the Grey Fox. He's been a thorn in the side of the guild for too long, and it turns out that the Countess of Anvil is in need of a new guard captain. The Grey Fox wants him reassigned so as to keep him out of their business in the Imperial City. Once again, they aren't assassins, and killing or ruining an honorable guard captain isn't what the guild is about. The plan is to replace the list of recommendations the steward of the Countess has drawn up with a forged list that highly favors Lex. So once in Anvil, we find the nearest information kiosk that tells us that we need to get into the desk of the steward, and that the castle blacksmith might be able to help us gain access to that part of the castle. So we go meet the blacksmith, who turns out to be a guild member, and he shows us a secret passage to let us slip inside. So under cover of night, we raid the desk for the original list and sneak out. With the aid of the kiosk again, we are able to enlist the services of a stranger who lives in an abandoned shack as a forger. He's very standoffish, but agrees to do the forgery. After a day, we return to pay him and get the forged letter with our boy Lex at the top. Then it's just a simple matter of sealing it with the Imperial seal back in the Imperial City. This isn't actually as simple as it sounds because the area is full of guards, but with some patience and luck we can get the letter sealed, and then it's just the matter of delivering it to the Countess, who agrees Lex is the right man for the job. She asks us to deliver his transfer notice, so we hoof it back to the Imperial City and deliver the transfer order to an unamused Lex. But, being the honorable guard that he is, he does not protest to the transfer and concedes defeat by the Grey Fox. Scriva tells us, good job, Lex won't be a problem for the guild anymore and we are rewarded and promoted.
Maybe fate will be kind and deliver him to me in Anvil.
From this point on, we'll be working for the Grey Fox directly. Every so often when we are waiting around in one of the cities, a messenger will appear to tell us where to meet the Grey Fox. Mithridel eventually appears and tells us to meet him in a guildmate's house in Bruma. So we do, and I really love the conversations with the Grey Fox. He's such a smooth character, very mild-mannered and sophisticated. And it doesn't at all seem like his status as the most wanted criminal in all of Tamriel gets to his head. It's no wonder his organization runs so smoothly, and once again I can't help but draw comparisons to the Mages Guild and the Fighters Guild, which were both just so dysfunctional with terribly bland or outright idiotic leaders. It almost feels like they were designed that way to contrast with the criminal organizations in order to say something about Cyrodiil itself, but I think that's just reading into things a little too much. So the Fox tasks us with stealing Sevilla's stone, which is kept under guard at a secret monastery by retired moth priests who have been blinded from years of reading Elder Scrolls. Stealing from a bunch of blind monks doesn't sound so hard, so we head up to the mountains where we bribe our way into the sanctuary where the priests live in total darkness. Fortunately, they are very keen of hearing and are surrounded by other guardians and traps, so sneaking through the large dungeon turns out to be more involved than one would expect. But like the rest of the quest, some good skills, patience, and luck eventually sees us successful, and we are able to slip out with a stone in tow. Back in Bruma, we deliver the stone to the Grey Fox, who expresses great joy at having the stone. He claims it will help him see past the defenses of the Imperial Palace, and that he's glad the Emperor had no idea the priests were sitting on this artifact, otherwise he would have had it destroyed or confiscated. This starts to shed light on the scheme the Fox is hatching, but before he says anything else, he insists that we part ways for now. We meet back up in another house in Coral after Amuse, who now has joined the guild and is actually a trusted assistant to the Grey Fox, delivers their quest to meet up. This time he gives us the task of acquiring the Arrow of Extrication, an arrow capable of unlocking doors. This item had just been acquired by the court wizard in Breville. Asking the beggars once again reveals the fact that the wizard has a secret passage leading to a secret lair where he conducts secret experiments that are too dangerous to be done in the city. So for the fourth time we are sneaking around in a castle looking for hidden passageways. We eventually find our way to the secret tunnels, which are a nightmare labyrinth of twisting tunnels, some of them underwater, and they are infested with necromancers, conjurers, and daedra. After getting lost down there for quite a while, we managed to get to the court wizard's tower, though it seems he doesn't mind our presence as we are both members of the Mages Guild. Once again, our membership in the Mages Guild causes a weird issue with this questline. Fortunately, nothing breaks as a result, and we are free to just take the Arrow of Extrication, or the head of it anyhow. That's all there is of it, and the Grey Fox notes he will need it repaired once we turn it over to him. He's about to reveal his plan, but cuts himself off, and then we part ways waiting for the next time we meet. It's not long until we are in another house in Shaden Hall, receiving another task from the Fox. This time he has us retrieving the boots of Spring-Heeled Jack, once belonging to a famous thief of the same name who lived 300 years ago. The Grey Fox points us to the last known living descendant of Spring-Heeled Jack, a nobleman in the Imperial City who goes by the name Jacobin, Earl of Imbel. Asking around the city reveals his house and the fact that he's a strange man who keeps odd hours as a night owl. Upon breaking into his house, we find a book, but it doesn't reveal the location of the boots, so we are forced to confront him directly. It's pretty obvious at this point that the man is a vampire and hides his affliction from the public. He cowers us and tells us the boots are in the family crypt in the basement, and he's always been too afraid to venture down there himself. Going down there we see why, as it's full of vampires. We get to the coffin of the famous Jack, only to find the boots aren't in there, only a journal that reveals he never actually died, but instead became a vampire. That vampire now goes by the name Jackbin. Once this is revealed to us, Jackbin, aka Spring-Heeled Jack, comes down to greet us with a claymore and full armor, and we are forced to kill him, taking the boots off his body. He tells us we should prepare for one final heist, as the risks are high but the reward will be more than worth all this trouble. We then part ways. When we meet up next in the Imperial City, the Grey Fox finally reveals his plans, stealing an Elder Scroll from the Imperial Palace Library. This isn't to be sold, but for the notoriety and because he has plans for the scroll. The plan is a long and intricate one that he's been developing for years, and with Sevilla's stone, he was able to figure out the last few parts to make it all possible. All the jobs we've been doing for him have been to prepare for this grand heist. Naturally, we agree to it, and I'll just let the Grey Fox himself explain the details.
The Elder Scrolls are kept in the Imperial Palace, behind a door that cannot be breached. Sevilla's stone has revealed a path around this door. You will have to travel the old way. Once used as an escape route for Imperial Emperors, it has been forgotten for centuries. To unseal the entrance, you must sneak into the basement of the palace and activate the Glass of Time, whatever that is. In the Imperial sewers, here is the key for the gate to that section of the sewers. I picked the pocket of Okato himself to get it. My scrying with Sevilla's stone has provided clues, but not the details. I know the tools you will need there, but not the obstacles themselves. The boots of Spring-Heel Jack will allow you to leap to an unreachable place. They will also protect you from a long fall. The Arrow of Extrication is the only way to unlock the final door. Take them both. Once you're inside the palace itself, you need to find the reading room. The blind priests will deliver a scroll to you there. I arranged for the notable Celia Cameron to want to read a particular Elder Scroll. Don't ask how. However, she will be unavoidably detained. You will take her place. Do not speak to the priests. They're blindfolded and will not realize it isn't her unless you speak.
Sounds complicated enough. Keeping in the spirit of the whole questline up until this point, we know the vague details but none of the specifics, and it will be up to us to improvise on the spot as we go. The job is ours now, and it's time to pull our final heist.
You have the scroll. I can hardly believe it. The odds were clearly against you. Capital job. Capital!
By the time I got to this quest, my skills had leveled up enough to remove a great deal of the difficulty from it. But if I'm being honest, this quest isn't about the challenge, it's about the context of the whole thing. We are stealing by far the most valuable item in the world now. It's simply epic. It feels like we've been preparing for this job ever since we joined up with the guild. We've built up our standing in the guild and proven our skills and loyalty to be entrusted with such a task for the Fox himself. His offer of something much greater than mere gold for this job entices us in just the right way, but the experience of pulling this heist in of itself is a reward. The lengthy crawl through the sewers is definitely more tedious than it ought to have been, especially since the sewers are just a confusing maze of similar looking corridors and chambers filled with undead enemies and goblins. Not exactly the sort of enemies that are easy or fun to try and outsmart, but I love how we've been pulling jobs in the civilized surface of the city for a while. And now we get to see a different side of the city. A side that is mostly abandoned and forgotten. It makes it feel like you're exploring ancient secrets, even if these are all spaces we've seen a billion times at this point, filled with enemies we've fought twice as much. But I can't stress enough the power of proper context for quests. I was a little frustrated and lost, sure, but once the sewer bit ended and we found ourselves in the old way that felt very similar to the introduction of the game where we were sneaking through the sewers with the Emperor, it had that satisfying coming full circle vibe that this whole quest radiates with. And then the old Imperial basement level goes into an Alien Ruins segment, and by this point we'd seen enough of these for the mystique to have worn off. Once again, it's the context of its placement. These are alien ruins beneath the Imperial City, and if there was any lingering doubt that the Imperial City had in fact been built by the elves, then this ought to eliminate those doubts once and for all. It's a brilliant touch that reinforces the feeling that what we are seeing no one has seen in centuries. We bring the scroll back to the Grey Fox, who instructs us to bring a ring to the Countess of Anvil because he wants to see how she reacts, signaling that there's just one last mystery left to sort out in this quest. We agree, as weird as it may seem. When in Anvil we do so, she tells us it belongs to her long-lost husband, whose identity she can't quite figure out, and by this point the mystery should be clear. I'll let the sequence explain the final bit.
By the power of the Elder Scrolls, I name Emmer Deriloth as the true thief of Nocturnal's cow.
You're the Grey Fox? I've been betrayed!
I am the Grey Fox, but you have not been betrayed.
But...
I am also your missing husband, Corvus.
Corvus? Is it really you? 10 years I've waited for word from you. Why did you hide from me?
10 years ago I inherited this cowl from the former guildmaster of the Thieves Guild. I became the new guildmaster, but I also received its curse. Whoever wears Nocturnal's cowl shall have his name stricken from history. Once I donned the cowl, no one in all of Tamriel could recognize me. With the cowl, I became the Grey Fox. Without it, I was a stranger, even to you.
You mean you were unable to return?
I've stood right next to you, and you didn't even know it. I cried out to you, "Here I am! It's me, Corvus!" But you just looked at me, confused.
You have broken my heart for a second time. I cannot let the infamous criminal mastermind, the Grey Fox, become the Count of Anvil. If you try to announce yourself as Corvus, I will deny you. I will deny you before the Emperor if I have to.
I guessed you would say these terrible things to me. That is why I brought my friend along. From this moment forward, I renounce my life of crime forever. I'm passing the grey cowl of the Thieves Guild to its new guild master.
There's a lot to unpack here, but essentially all the rumors we have heard about the Grey Fox were partly true because the Grey Fox is an identity created by the magic of the cowl itself. The person bequeathed with it would lose their identity to anyone else and could only be seen as the Grey Fox, explaining how he's been around for 300 years. The original guildmaster had stolen the Grey Cowl from Nocturnal herself, which was the source of the curse leading to the chain of events Corvus described, which we witnessed ourselves during the quests. With the curse finally lifted and the pages of time altered once more, Corvus renounces his title as Guildmaster and passes it and the curse-lifted cowl over to us, staying true to his promise that the reward would be greater than mere gold, bringing to a satisfying close the Thieves Guild questline. There's so much in this questline that makes it one of the best experiences in the game. As I said in the beginning, the entire Thieves Guild is all about mystery, secrecy, rumors, and misdirection. Bethesda establishes this thematic tone about the guild before we even join it. Hell, when I first played Oblivion, I didn't even think the guild was real. That tone is carried all the way through to the end when it is given a fitting and thematically sound conclusion. All the mysteries surrounding the guild. What is the guild? Who is in it? How do you join it? How do they operate? Who is the leader? Is the Grey Fox real? Who started the guild? Are the rumors about the Grey Fox true? All of these questions we learn the answers to over the course of the questline, and they are all set up before we even knew if the guild was even real, or just a figment of people's imagination. Not a single question is left unanswered, and they are all answered in a satisfying way. By the end of the guild, we understand its structure, the people who make it up, how they operate, their motivations, how they impact Cyrodiil, and how Cyrodiil feels about them in response. It's all there, it perfectly integrates with the world and does so much to build up certain aspects of itself, the world, and the characters related to the guild. It's something none of the major quests or guilds leading up to this point have done. But going even deeper into the nuts and bolts of the quests themselves, I gotta say there isn't a bad quest in the bunch. Some of them are weaker than others, but even the worst quests in the line beat the best of the Mages Guild. It's because the quests are designed to play off the greatest strengths of Oblivion itself, which is player freedom. The game trusts you to solve the open-ended objectives yourself, to find the solutions yourself and use what you've been learning about the game and its systems to come up with solutions. They even use the game systems like Radiant AI to build some of their objectives around, elevating the systems to more than just the cheap window dressings they ordinarily are relegated to. There's plenty of ways to get most of these quests done. Many of those ways are probably cheesy or could break the game, but they are there, and the game doesn't even straitjacket you the way the Mages Guild does. In fact, the Mages Guild never even trusts you with open objectives, as the entire guild was about completing boring, trivial fetch and delivery tasks, or devolves into some dungeon crawling experience we can get by just wandering the world on our own time. The Thieves Guild offers unique opportunities for challenges and experiences that simply cannot be had anywhere else. I'll briefly mention the fact that the guild also encourages independent thieving to reinforce the idea that you're a fucking thief, while the Mages Guild has absolutely none of that. You could go through the entire Mages Guild without casting a single spell. Meanwhile, sneaking, lockpicking, and stealing shit is absolutely essential to the Thieves Guild. Somehow the guild manages to restrict you to certain playstyles that is thematically relevant to it and yet feels far more liberating and rewarding than a quest that felt like it went out of its way to be as non-committal to a particular playstyle as possible. The Thieves Guild is proof that Bethesda didn't have to be so terrified of putting limits on player freedom at certain junctions of the game. We have a perfect example of this here that will actually make the game feel more liberating. Bethesda just had to learn to trust their own players more. Put into the greater context of Oblivion, the Thieves Guild actually leaves me a little sad. It shows what this game could have actually been if there was this level of commitment to the quality of its development. It's one of the really high highs that makes the really low lows so intolerable in retrospect. This is why I chose to play these quests in worst to best order. I don't think I would have been able to stomach the Mages Guild if the reverse order was taken. That's how starkly different these two guilds stand. And that, I think, perfectly summarizes the feeling I get from Oblivion as a whole. But now we're pulling away from the Thieves Guild, so it's probably about time to say farewell to it in general and welcome our next and final major quest line to the stage. Sithis is calling. Good God, I did not even for a second think this video was going to be this long. I had no intention of going this deep, covering some of the guild's quest by quest, but I just couldn't think of a better way to abbreviate this stuff. Each quest in some of these quest chains showed a different aspect, and if I want to paint as complete of a picture of Oblivion as I can, I have no choice but to pick through them slowly. Unfortunately, this means I have to split the video about the quest into 2 videos because I ain't editing a 4-hour timeline, no way, no how. I was hoping I'd at least get the Dark Brotherhood into this video, but the Thieves Guild dominated too much time and I need to give the Dark Brotherhood its proper dues, because if covering the main story, the Mages Guild, and the Thieves Guild has taught me anything while writing this script, I find a shit ton more to talk about than I originally had in mind as I'm going. I already know the Dark Brotherhood is going to be a beast, but with this newfound knowledge, there's no way I was making it into part 1. So follow me into the next video where we will finally conclude the guilds, get into some notable side quests, and cover the Daetrix Shrines. Please consider doing the things that appeal to the algorithm gods, and I'll see you in the next one.